Hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here for this exciting discussion. As Gemma kindly already explained, the premise of our conversation is around how creatives can leverage their power, creating the products that we can fall in love with as consumers or brand advocates. What I'd love to start by doing is contextualizing the great panel that we have in front of us, because we've got representation from menswear, women's wear, and also the accessories market. We have a jewelry brand here as well. So to start off, I'd love you each to just give me a bit of context about your actual role within the creative process at your respective brands. So I'll start with you, Charlotte.
I'm the creative director, so I'm literally involved with all the creative parts of the company, both in terms of design, sourcing, packaging, everything.
Right, so it's a 360 for you.
Yeah.
Excellent. And yourself, Christopher?
Yeah, so at Raeburn, we really focus on three things. We call it remade, reduced, or recycled. And actually, as a company, it's been going just over 10 years now. We've really just been trying to push as much as we can in a responsible way. And I think firmly as a creative, it's actually our obligation as designers, as creatives, to actually really think about the items we're making and then, really obviously bring them to our communities in a meaningful way. The exciting news is that beyond Raeburn, I've recently taken on the role as Global Creative Director for Timberland. So all of a sudden, I'm then able to work on a bigger scale as well.
Right, and that's the Global Creative Director at Timberland, right?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And Stephen, would you just shed a bit of a light about your role specifically?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm a Chief Creative Officer at Pandora, and I look at my role as a conductor of a very large orchestra with a lot of musicians. And fundamentally, my responsibility is to make sure that with all these musicians that we're aligned across our sort of value chain from, especially always towards the end consumer, so online, offline, TVC, product, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a team effort, but I'm trying to conduct a very large organization of phenomenal musicians within the value chain.
Okay, great. So that's good for context.
Yeah.
So diving into the actual question, obviously, there's an increased spotlight on sustainability. Like, we're here for the Fashion Summit, but even in the more mainstream areas of fashion press and so on, it's a talking point. It's becoming increasingly visible. How has that kind of increased scrutiny or increased number of eyeballs on the sustainable fashion space, how has that impacted how you create your products sustainably? Christopher, could you answer that?
Well, I think for us personally, because it was so embedded in what we were doing from the beginning, we found it relatively easy to then grow and sort of work within that new visibility. And for us, it's really exciting. You know, people have sort of said to me, oh, what do I think about the sustainability trend? Like, wow, guys, this isn't a trend.
Yeah.
We need to fundamentally change what we're doing as an industry.
Right.
And I really see that my role within Raeburn is to disrupt and then also to work with bigger brands to have that opportunity to magnify and really make a difference.
Right, but as the space is getting kind of busier, or I suppose more and more well occupied, are you having to fight in a different way to communicate? Like you said, you've been doing it from the very beginning, and you've got newcomers in the space. Has that changed maybe how you talk about what you've been doing to kind of, I guess, differentiate yourself?
Wow. Well, I think actually to answer it in a slightly different way, I really look at it as being very positive, that now access to materials, for example, that 10 years ago, or when I was studying 20, nearly 20 years ago now, they just weren't really that accessible. Whereas now it's really shifted, and I think it's a lot more, well, as I say, sort of a lot more part of popular vocabulary. People understand what they're talking about and what they're looking for. And then importantly, from our perspective, we're also able to produce with materials that maybe we didn't have access to certainly 10 years ago.
Right, okay. Charlotte, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because with regards to what Christopher just said around sourcing, I know with Red Carpet Green Dress, the pushback we've always had is about how challenging it is to find the inputs and then the cost of those inputs. And, you know, this is celebrating 10 years of, you know, the Copenhagen Fashion Summit. It's been trying to do this for a long time. Is it as challenging as we're often led to believe, or is it perhaps about making compromises on where you spend money and where you choose not to? I'd love your thoughts on that.
I mean, I've been here for 10 years. We've been upcycling since 2002. And it's definitely much better now to source and to get good solutions. Like even if you go to the basement to -1, there's an amazing lab where you can get fabrics and partners and team up. And then of course it's also important that you make some sacrifices yourself. Like you need to use more money on the fabric because recycled wool can go up to like 100% more on the fabric. So you need to make the investment also.
I love that you talked about sacrifices, because that's kind of a word I don't think we hear a lot. And in business, it's also about kind of offsetting things, like we can spend more on this and less on that. For example, Reformation do no marketing materials so that they can put more money into the material side. With your brand specifically, could you give examples of product lines or things that you've just had to let go of to be able to keep designing sustainably?
Yeah, like for instance, we used to sell like fur and leather, and it was up to like 15% of our turnover, and then we stopped doing it because we feel that it's also young people have a really good bullshit filter. So if you say it's not enough to have a vegan canteen, you need to walk the talk. So we're just like we stopped doing it, and it's a good sacrifice for brands. I mean, you can get so much more, and it's really beautiful what you can design from. So it's not boring.
So it's almost redefining what we see as a sacrifice.
Yeah,
what might be exactly, and actually might be an investment in the future of your brand. I'd love to ask you, Stephen. Often, I think it's come up a few times in the conference as well, this idea of talking about what we're doing with our products, so talking about how they are sustainable, listing their attributes, and communicating that when you're marketing or just in general dialogue with your customers. Do you think that is the best way to really push sustainable products, or do you feel that design-led, focusing on creating a beautiful product means you don't need to talk about all of these other things, that aesthetic is the main pull for customers, so make sure that that's excellent? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we do jewelry, and I think jewelry is really a form of self-expression. And I think men and women are humans, buy jewelry for self-expression, but also for meaning. And I think what is so important today is, and I always talk about the consumer as owns our brand. I think that if we can add on our product the part of sustainability on top of that, I feel truly that the end consumer is searching for that more and more today. And I think this conference is a perfect example of driving that forward. But I think what is so important is that the consumer today is actually wants and demanding that. So I feel that in the jewelry industry, we are in the process of really trying to apply that more. And I think when I speak to the Gen Z generation, which I spend a lot of time talking to them, because I feel there's no filter.
Right.
And I feel that straight talking, authentic, to the point. And I have to say, the more I talk with them, because I'm not of that generation, I feel they see, through the bullshit.
Right.
And
so they want to know, what is it, where was it made, who made it, give me everything.
Absolutely.
And do you almost feel that if you are that way, they're not more forgiving, because I don't really want to use that word, but they're more accepting of where you aren't kind of excellent, because at least you're honest about your efforts and what's working and what's not working? Do you feel like when we try and maybe gloss over that, that's when they kind of are a bit more critical? I'd love your thoughts on this as well, Christopher.
Go ahead, Christopher. Yeah, I mean, I found transparency on every level is always the way to be. I mean, there's some examples. We open up our space. We call it the Raeburn Lab in London. And we host workshops there. We do a lot of activities essentially to educate and inspire. We do a lot of things for free, whether it be repairs or tours. And we really just find that that level, and again, I use the word transparency, means that we get a lot of support. We also get really good questions as well. We learn a lot ourselves through that process, and we find that so valuable. And you know what, often there are things that we learn and we do differently, and we question ourselves. just because of that transparent process. So the best sort of advice I have wherever possible is just open the door.
Right.
You know, open the door. We heard some of the talks earlier, you know, in terms of doing something. And you'll find that then the energy that comes with that is fantastic.
Because I think, Stephen, you've mentioned this before, but it's a relationship. Like, and Christopher, you've said before that, you know, people are kind of supporting your brand or they're brand advocates, but you don't want that to be the end of it. It's supposed to be an ongoing dialogue.
Absolutely.
You know, you have the product, but you have more than that. Charlotte, I'm really interested in that whole point that was raised about dialogue, because as creatives, designers, creative directors, you are creating a product for your brand advocates, for your consumers. But how has that become more of a two-way creative process now? Like, I know that you have, with Designers Remix, you invited your customers to bring in items that you would then rework, and Christopher, you have your labs. Have you found the creative process has become more of a two-way exchange and more of a dialogue versus you presenting something and saying, voila?
Yeah, definitely. I think both communication and transparency is so important. So we have a take-back scheme where we collect people's old clothes. And then we work together with a design school here in Copenhagen, and they upcycle. And we have a dialogue with the students, and as we talked about earlier, Stephen and I, there's the young students that they're so amazing. They ask the right questions, they give you so much input, and we learn so much to have this conversation.
Which you then, like, you take those learnings, I'm guessing, and incorporate them into how you're doing business going forward. Stephen, I know that we'd spoken as well about cultural nuances in terms of that dialogue. So with regards to creating sustainable products, as you are present in different markets, I know Pandora is present in, you've got over nearly 8,000 points of sale around the world. How have you seen the nuances between, I don't know, your market in Asia and in Europe feed back to how you create your products sustainably?
Yeah. Well, I want to first start on the founder of the company, because, and I will get to the question, but I think that, you know, Per Enevoldsen, who founded Pandora, he already, before sustainability was really, he started that. So it's always been in the ethos of Pandora.
Right.
And I can go from quality materials. So one statistic I'd like to give, in 2018, 88% of our silver was recycled.
Right.
100% of our gold was recycled. I think on labor conditions, he's been unbelievable in that context. I also think, you know, how we're minimizing, you know, the impact on the environment is so important. And Paris started out. But I think with the society where we're going with climate change and also transparency within the supply chain is fundamental. And I think that, you know, we are an integrated value chain. And I think, you know, as I said to you, which I think is so important, we can be sustainable on some things, and we should be amplifying where we're really powerful with this.
Right.
And I think, you know, we see differences in, I would call, emerging markets versus mature markets.
Right.
And I have to say, you know, some of the data that we're looking at, I find China, for instance, is moving much faster on this with actually the younger generation than we actually anticipated.
Can we unpack speed? Because I think when whenever we hear the word speed and fashion, I think to some people it just thinks, get more out there quicker. That's kind of a bit of a negative association with the word. And people think fast, speed, more quantity, out there quicker. So when you say faster, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think, you know, we have a value chain, as I said, and I think, you know, within a value chain, you're constantly looking to be more effective and efficient. I think what we need to do, especially, you know, with recycling and sustainability, is I think, unfortunately, you know, you have to, you have, you know, internal blockers sometimes, but I look at it as our responsibility as a management team to understand where do we want to amplify within our value chain this. So I think speed is an important terminology, but I actually think that there needs to be agility to get faster to market with different demands within different markets and regions.
Right, because we have been having this conversation for such a long time, and in a way you'd almost expect there to be more change. I know with Red Carpet, we have our sustainable piece on the red carpet, and we're still one or two pieces, and that's not enough.
Right.
Considering it's a campaign that's been going for 10 years, there should be so much more.
Right.
Christopher, you're in such an interesting hybrid role right now, because obviously you're a creative director at Raeburn, but also global creative director for Timberland. When we think about the difference between your companies. So you represent almost that independent as well as the global, extremely present brands such as Timberland. What challenges or opportunities do you find with trying to get these sustainable products to market in those two hybrid roles?
Yeah, I mean,
and opportunities, not all,
I think the exciting thing for me is that at Raeburn we are compact, as you mentioned. We have a lot of flexibility. We can genuinely go from having an idea on a Monday morning to having something in our store by Friday.
Right.
And this is something that I think a lot of big brands are really potentially quite envious of, having that speed in a different way and flexibility. But the really exciting thing for me personally is taking the learnings of 10 years at Raeburn, but then really being able to amplify them and really work with a truly global brand in Timberland. And the exciting thing with Timberland is actually it's a company that has real purpose, that even back to 2007, when I just graduated from the Royal College of Art, it released the Earthkeeper boot. The Earthkeeper boot was specifically designed in the most responsible way in terms of manufacturing, sourcing of materials, etc. And it's still an icon. It's still in the line now. It's still growing. And so that, in context, was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And
It was.
I suppose now the exciting thing is how we can bring more flexibility into Timberland and how we can really start to make a difference on a global scale. And the other thing for me on a personal level is I'm excited as a designer how my impact on Timberland can make a difference. But then Timberland is owned by VF.
Right.
They own big brands like the North Face and Vans and a portfolio around 30 brands. So then the knock-on effect of the way that I've designed and brought creativity in a very experimental way knocks on and on and on.
Right.
And as we heard this morning, this is about collaboration. This is about partnership. It's about transparency. So I take a lot of excitement that that knock-on effect can really help.
Absolutely.
And it's as simple as that.
You said something quite interesting there around almost kind of the frustration that perhaps like a bigger brand might feel with not being able to get that speed to market or get that to that kind of brand advocate as quickly as like a smaller brand. But is it possible that if you have a global brand that they almost have that ability to trial in like one of their many stores and that's not the end of the world if that does or doesn't work? Like, I just wonder, why is it so difficult, not to just do like a test run in one location?
Yeah, I mean, it's scale, very simply. Factories that are set up for making at points hundreds of thousands or even millions of units per year find it very difficult to then switch and have a line that might make 50 or 100 or 200 or 300. But
and is there not that flexibility with the factory when you've got a relationship?
Absolutely, and this is absolutely the way that I think a lot of businesses are going. Of course, we need scale, but then we also need that flexibility. And the exciting thing is that Timberland are changing, and this is something we're looking at. So I'm really proud to be part of that.
Excellent. And with you, Charlotte, so you're like as a smaller kind of a more independent brand, but still a huge brand with great global presence. Do you find that you're able to be more agile and closer to, like obviously, like Stephen alluded, the speed with which you can get pieces to market, but also as a result of being slightly smaller, do you feel that there's more at stake when you are creating these products? Because, it's like your livelihood in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I mean, being an independent designer these days, I also think you should consider really much that you need to do something more classic that people can actually keep. So speed for us is another thing. I love when people are wearing something vintage from our collections that you think about not buying new, that you slow down a little bit because there's too much clothing out there in general. So I think about that when I design, that it should last long, have a longer life cycle.
And do you feel like that messaging around slow down, do you feel like it almost harnesses respect from your brand advocates? Because I know, Christopher, you had like your blackout, Black Friday, you just shut down, I think, your e-commerce store, didn't you? You're just like, we're not supporting this.
Yeah, I mean, we really see our role as just to disrupt, and we'll test and poke and learn and make lots of mistakes, importantly, and we're by no means perfect as a brand, but I think, again, if you're open and honest and you test and you learn and you improve, then that's good. And as I say, then having the opportunity to magnify that on on a big scale with other brands.
Right.
It's exciting.
Okay. My last question would be around the premise of this, because obviously our concept was designers and creative directors hold the power, but how are they leveraging that power to make items we fall in love with and to make sustainability cool? But who decides that sustainability is cool? You know, I know that, Charlotte, you won an Elle Style Award recently. Do you feel that that buy-in and support from the media and from, I hate the word influencers, but you know, people who almost dictate what is, and do we need more of that in this space? Because otherwise, who decides what is cool for sustainability? I'd love to hear from any of you on that one.
I'll give that a go. I mean, for me, I'd remove the word sustainability completely from that sentence.
Right.
This is about good design, and it's about responsible design and our obligations as creatives to do things in the right way.
Right.
The thing that gives me real confidence is that the younger generation coming through, exactly as we heard from Stephen, this isn't even, oh, should I design sustainably or not? Or it's not even part of the vocabulary. It's just doing things in the right way, in a conscious way. And that, for me, is where I take so much confidence. And again, it's where I redouble my efforts personally and I push more because I know this is the future and the younger generation are coming through.
Yeah.
Right.
I would reiterate the same thing that Christopher said. It's about circular fashion, co-creation, and I always talk about the consumer. We need to co-create with them. It's not sustainability. This is the future, and we have to also make sure, that we are engaged and have an open dialogue with these people. So I cannot reiterate what Christopher said, and I think at Pandora we have a scalability issue, but I don't think that's the excuse. I mean, I think we have to always keep in mind where the consumer is moving, and especially I always talk about the new generation.
Right.
This is, and great design is not just about sustainability. It's sustainability is really, it's a word that actually shouldn't be used in design anymore.
Okay.
It's a given.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's a good closer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, Christopher, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.